The first time Adrian Matthews laid eyes on Zoe Jackson, she was rushing down the aisle in a flurry of lavender silk and flustered apologies. As the third bridesmaid to make her entrance at his best friend Daniel's wedding, she had tripped on her gown, dropped her bouquet, and nearly crashed into a flower arrangement. Adrian couldn't help but smile at the genuine look of mortification on her face as she composed herself with a deep breath and continued her processional with determined dignity. Something about that moment of vulnerability, followed by quiet resilience, captured his attention in a way that the polished perfection of the other wedding attendants had not. Adrian shifted in his seat, straightening his perfectly tailored suit. At 34, he had built maritime ventures from a small shipping logistics startup into one of the East Coast's most successful maritime management firms. The company now employed over 500 people, managed 30 vessels, and had revolutionized shipping logistics along the eastern seaboard. Business acquisitions, profit margins, and expansion strategies were his comfort zone, not wedding small talk or the unsettling flutter he felt watching the clumsy bridesmaid take her place at the altar. After the ceremony, Adrian found himself at the reception bar ordering a Scotch neat when a soft voice spoke beside him. "I'll take a glass of the Cabernet, please." He turned to find the bridesmaid Zoe standing next to him. Up close, her eyes were a warm amber that crinkled slightly at the corners when she smiled at the bartender. "Congratulations on not completely wiping out during the ceremony," Adrian said before he could stop himself, immediately regretting his words. To his surprise, she laughed. "Thanks. I was aiming for total catastrophe, but I'll settle for partial humiliation. I'm Adrian Matthews, friend of the groom, Zoe Jackson, friend of the bride and professional wedding disaster." She accepted her wine from the bartender. "So, Adrian Matthews, what do you do when you're not watching bridesmaids stumble down aisles?" "I run a company called Maritime Ventures. We manage shipping logistics." "Ah, shipping. That explains the yacht club tan and the watch that probably costs more than my car." She sipped her wine, eyes twinkling. Adrian glanced at his Patek Philippe with a wry smile. "It was a gift to myself when I signed my first major contract. And what does the CEO of Maritime Ventures do for fun, besides attend weddings and critique bridesmaid coordination?" "Work, mostly," he admitted. "Though I do sail when I can find the time." "Of course you do," she said with a laugh, very on brand. Before Adrian could respond, the maid of honor appeared at Zoe's elbow, whisking her away for photos. As she left, she glanced back over her shoulder with a small smile that stayed with Adrian throughout the evening. Later, during the reception dinner, Adrian discovered he had been seated at the same table as Zoe. She was deep in conversation with an elderly couple when he arrived, gesturing animatedly as she told a story that had them both laughing. "And that's how I ended up teaching art to preschoolers with paint in my hair and a frog in my pocket," she concluded as Adrian took the empty seat beside her. "Should I be concerned about any amphibians at this wedding?" he asked. She turned to him with a grin. "No promises, I'm a walking disaster zone, art teacher." "That makes sense," he said, noting the creative way she had styled her hair with small flowers woven through the pins. "What gave it away?" He nodded toward her hands. "Slight paint stains under your nails, plus you have this observant way of looking at things." Zoe looked down at her hands and laughed. "I scrubbed for an hour. These kids use paint that could survive the apocalypse." Throughout dinner, Adrian found himself increasingly charmed by Zoe's animated stories about her preschoolers and her passion for introducing children to art. She asked thoughtful questions about his business, seeming genuinely interested rather than impressed by his success. "So you basically coordinate massive ships moving cargo around the world?" she asked. "That's simplifying it a bit, but essentially yes. We've developed software that optimizes shipping routes, manages cargo distribution, and coordinates with ports for faster loading and unloading." "Like air traffic control, but for ships," Adrian smiled, impressed by her quick understanding. "That's actually a good analogy." The conversation flowed easily between them until the DJ announced the first dance. As the newlyweds took the floor, Adrian noticed Zoe watching them with genuine joy, her eyes soft. "They look happy," he commented. "They are. Emma told me she knew Daniel was the one the first time he made her laugh so hard she snorted coffee through her nose." Adrian chuckled. Daniel said he knew when she called him at 2 a.m. to bail her out of a community theater disaster, and he realized he'd drive anywhere, anytime just to see her. "That's sweet," Zoe turned to him. "What about you? Has anyone ever made you drive across town at 2 a.m.? "No," Adrian admitted. "My relationships tend to be more scheduled romance. Sounds thrilling. It's efficient," he defended, though even to his own ears it sounded hollow. Ah yes, the cornerstone of all great love stories, efficiency. As the night progressed, Adrian found himself gravitating toward Zoe on the dance floor and at the dessert table. She was refreshingly genuine in a world where he was accustomed to calculated interactions. When the bouquet toss came, she deliberately stepped back, whispering to him that she thought the tradition was ridiculously heteronormative and competitive. "Not interested in being next?" he asked. "Not interested in elbowing someone's grandmother for flowers," she corrected, just as the bouquet sailed through the air and landed directly in her unprepared hands. The look of startled dismay on her face made Adrian laugh harder than he had in months. Near the end of the night, Adrian helped Zoe collect centerpieces that the bride had asked her to save for a local nursing home. "So, Zoe Jackson, disaster-prone art teacher and accidental bouquet catcher," he said as they wrapped the flower arrangements. "Would you consider having dinner with me sometime?" She looked up, genuine surprise in her expression. "You're asking me out?" "Yes, is that so surprising, kind of?" "Men like you don't usually ask out women like me." "Men like me? You know, successful, polished, probably dates models and marketing executives." Adrian set down the flowers he was wrapping. "And what kind of women do you think you are?" Zoe gestured to herself. "The kind who trips at weddings, has permanent paint under her fingernails, and can't afford a watch that costs more than a car. I find that kind of woman infinitely more interesting than marketing executives," he said honestly. A small smile played at her lips. "In that case, Adrian Matthews, I would love to have dinner with you." Their first date was at a small Italian restaurant in the city the following Friday. Adrian arrived early, uncharacteristically nervous. He had dated plenty of women over the years, but none had intrigued him the way Zoe did. She arrived 5 minutes late, slightly breathless, wearing a simple green dress that brought out the warmth in her eyes. "Sorry I'm late," she said, sliding into the chair across from him. "One of my students had a meltdown over the blue paint being too blue, and his mom was late picking him up." "Too blue?" Adrian asked, smiling. "4-year-olds have very specific artistic standards," she explained with complete seriousness that made him laugh. Over pasta and wine, Adrian learned that Zoe had grown up in a small town upstate, studied art education, and now taught at a private preschool while also running community art programs for underserved neighborhoods on weekends. She spoke passionately about making art accessible to children who might not otherwise have the opportunity. "It's not just about teaching them to draw," she explained. "It's about giving them a way to express themselves, to process emotions they might not have words for yet." "That's important work," Adrian said, genuinely impressed. "What about you? How does a guy end up running a shipping empire before he's 40? Adrian told her about growing up in a coastal town, his father a harbor pilot and his mother an accountant. How he'd combined his love of the sea with his head for business, starting maritime ventures in his late 20s with a loan and a single contract. "The first 2 years I slept on a cot in my office," he admitted. "Every penny went back into the business." "So you built it all yourself," she said. "That's impressive. I had help, good mentors, a solid team, and now we manage shipping logistics for companies across 37 countries. We're expanding into South America next quarter." As he drove her home after dinner, Adrian found himself taking the long route, reluctant for the evening to end. They pulled up to her apartment building a modest brick structure in an artistic but not upscale neighborhood, and he walked her to the door. "I had a really nice time," Zoe said, keys in hand. "Despite the fact that you probably spent more on that dinner than my weekly grocery budget," Adrian smiled. "I had a nice time too. Would it be okay if I called you tomorrow? I'd like that." She hesitated, then rose on her tiptoes and kissed his cheek before disappearing into her building. Adrian stood there a moment longer than necessary, feeling strangely elated by such a simple gesture. Over the next few weeks, they fell into a rhythm. Adrian would leave work early on Fridays for dinner dates. Saturdays, he sometimes joined Zoe at her community art classes, rolling up the sleeves of his designer shirts to help children create gloriously messy masterpieces. On Sundays, he took her sailing on his yacht, teaching her to navigate the open waters. "I still can't believe you own an actual yacht," Zoe said one Sunday, the wind catching her hair as they cut through the waves. "It's such a CEO cliché." "Says the art teacher with paint-stained clothes," he teased back. "Besides, sailing keeps me connected to why I started the business in the first place, my love for the sea." "Fair point." She leaned against the railing, watching the coastline. "Although I'm pretty sure most art teachers don't actually have paint stained everything. You're not most art teachers." She turned to him with a soft smile that made his heart stutter. "And you're not most CEOs." After 6 weeks of dating, Adrian invited Zoe to a charity gala hosted by Maritime Ventures. It would be their first public appearance in his professional world, and he was uncharacteristically concerned about how she would feel among his business associates. "You don't have to come if it sounds boring," he assured her over the phone. "These events can be pretty stuffy." "Are you kidding? I've always wanted to see how the other half lives," Zoe replied. "Besides, I already bought a dress that cost more than my rent, so I'm definitely coming." The night of the gala, Adrian sent a car to pick her up, unable to do it himself because of last-minute preparations. When she finally arrived at the downtown hotel ballroom, he momentarily lost the thread of his conversation with an important investor. Zoe stood in the doorway wearing a midnight blue gown that flowed like water around her. Her hair was swept up elegantly, though a few artful tendrils had escaped intentionally, he was sure. She looked beautiful but also distinctly herself, not trying to become someone else for the occasion. "Excuse me," he said to the investor, crossing the room to meet her. "Do I look okay?" she asked, a rare moment of insecurity crossing her face. "I feel like I'm playing dress-up in someone else's life." Adrian took her hand. "You look incredible. And this is very much your life now, if you want it to be." Throughout the evening, Adrian watched with pride as Zoe charmed his colleagues and business partners with her genuine warmth and quick wit. She spoke passionately about her art program when asked about her work, unembarrassed by the stark difference between her career and those of the corporate executives surrounding them. "Your girlfriend is delightful," commented Marion Carter, one of Adrian's board members, as they watched Zoe enthusiastically describing something to a group that included 2 shipping magnates and a tech investor. "Completely unpretentious. Where did you find her?" "At Daniel's wedding." "She was a bridesmaid." Marion raised an eyebrow. "Interesting, not your usual type." "No," Adrian agreed, smiling as Zoe caught his eye across the room. "She's much better." Later that night, as they swayed together on the dance floor, Zoe rested her head against his shoulder. "Your world is exhausting," she murmured. "Everyone's always networking, always calculating." "Not everyone," Adrian said, pulling her closer. "Not me, not when I'm with you." She looked up at him, searching his face. "Is that why you like me? Because I'm not part of all this?" "I like you because you're passionate, genuine, slightly disaster-prone," he said, making her laugh. "Being outside my usual circles is just a bonus." After the gala, their relationship deepened. Adrian found himself sharing details of his business challenges that he'd never discussed with previous partners. Zoe confided her dreams of starting her own art school someday, though she worried about the financial feasibility. "You could do it," Adrian told her one night as they sat on her small apartment balcony sharing takeout. "You have the vision and the talent. But not the capital, she sighed. Do you know how much real estate costs in this city? I might have some idea, he said dryly. But there are grants, investors. You could start small, build it up. Is that your CEO advice? Start small. It's how I started. One contract, remember? She nudged him with her shoulder. Look at you now, though. Maritime Ventures is enormous. It didn't happen overnight. Success rarely does. As summer turned to fall, Adrian realized that for the first time in his adult life, his work had taken a backseat to his personal life. He found himself delegating tasks he would have previously handled himself, leaving the office at reasonable hours, and even taking entire weekends away from his email. His executive assistant, Denise, who had been with him since the early days, commented on the change one morning as she handed him his schedule. "Whatever this Zoe is doing, I approve," she said bluntly. "You've smiled more in the past 3 months than in the 3 years before that." Adrian couldn't deny it. Zoe had brought a lightness to his life that he hadn't realized was missing. Her perspective challenged his in ways that made him think differently about success, about what mattered, but their different worlds occasionally caused friction. After 4 months of dating, they had their first serious argument when Adrian had to cancel weekend plans for an emergency business trip to Singapore. "You could have sent someone else," Zoe said, frustration evident in her voice over the phone. "We've been planning this weekend for weeks." "This client represents 20% of our Asian market," Adrian explained, packing his suitcase while they talked. "I have to go personally." "Right, because business always comes first." "That's not fair, Zoe. You know I've been rearranging my schedule for us constantly." "And I appreciate that," she sighed. Sometimes I wonder if I'm asking you to be someone you're not, someone who doesn't always put work first." The comment stung because there was truth in it. Before Zoe, work had always been his priority. "I'm trying," he said quietly. "I'm not perfect at balancing everything yet, but I'm trying." "I know," she softened. "Go charm your client in Singapore. We'll figure it out when you get back." When Adrian returned 4 days later, he went straight to Zoe's apartment from the airport. She opened the door in paint-splattered overalls, clearly in the middle of a project. "You're back," she said, surprised. "I came straight here." He held out a small package, peace offering from halfway around the world. Inside was a set of rare Japanese watercolors he'd found in a small art supply shop in Singapore. "You remembered I wanted to try these," she said, touched by the thoughtfulness. "I remember everything you tell me, Zoe." That night, as they lay tangled together in her bed, Adrian realized with startling clarity that he was in love with her. The thought didn't frighten him as it might have once. Instead, it felt like the most natural conclusion to the path they'd been walking together. As their 6-month anniversary approached, Adrian planned a special weekend. He rented a coastal cottage north of the city, arranging for a private chef and making reservations at exclusive restaurants. He wanted everything to be perfect because he had made a decision he was going to ask Zoe to move in with him. The morning they were set to leave, however, Zoe called him sounding distressed. "I can't make it this weekend," she said. "There's been a fire at the community center where I teach my Saturday classes. Nothing serious, but there's smoke damage to all the art supplies and the kids' projects for the upcoming show. I need to sort it out." "Can't someone else handle it?" Adrian asked, disappointed. "It's my program, Adrian. These kids have been working on these pieces for months. The exhibition is in 2 weeks. Adrian was silent for a moment, then said, "Tell me where to meet you." "What?" "At the community center. Tell me where to meet you. I'm coming to help." 3 hours later, Adrian found himself in a smoke-damaged classroom, sleeves rolled up, helping Zoe salvage what they could and list what needed replacement. "You didn't have to cancel our weekend," she said as they worked. "I would have understood." "I know," Adrian replied, carefully wrapping a clay sculpture that had survived the smoke. "But this matters to you, so it matters to me." That evening, after they had done all they could at the center, Adrian took Zoe to dinner at a casual neighborhood restaurant rather than the upscale coastal venue he'd originally reserved. "I've been thinking," he said as they shared dessert. What if we used some of the Maritime Ventures charitable foundation funds to rebuild the art room? Not just replace what was lost, but upgrade everything? Zoe looked up, surprised. You do that? The foundation supports educational initiatives. This fits perfectly within our mission. But isn't there a whole process? Applications, reviews? Adrian smiled. Being the CEO has some advantages. I can expedite things. I don't want special treatment just because I'm dating you, she said carefully. It's not special treatment. It's recognizing a valuable program that needs support. I would have approved this regardless of our relationship. He reached across the table for her hand. But I'll admit, seeing how passionate you are about these kids and their art made me notice it in a way I might not have otherwise. The next day, instead of their romantic getaway, they spent hours shopping for art supplies. Adrian was amazed at Zoe's detailed knowledge as she selected specific brands of paint, particular types of brushes, and various papers that would best serve her students' needs. As they loaded supplies into his car, Adrian said, "Move in with me." Zoe froze, a package of colored pencils in her hands. "What? Move in with me," he repeated. "I was going to ask you this weekend at the cottage, but this seems more fitting somehow." "In the parking lot of an art supply store," she laughed incredulously. "Yes, because this is us plans changing, adapting, finding the beauty in the unexpected." He took the pencils from her and set them in the car, then took both her hands. "I love you, Zoe Jackson. I love your passion and your mess and the way you've completely upended my carefully ordered life. Move in with me." Her eyes were wide, searching his face. "Your penthouse is immaculate. I would destroy it with paint and clay and general chaos. Then we'll redecorate, create a studio space. Whatever you need. Are you sure about this?" "I've never been more sure of anything." A slow smile spread across her face. "Then yes, I'll move in with you, Adrian Matthews, despite your excessive wealth and alarming organizational skills." They sealed the agreement with a kiss in the art store parking lot, surrounded by supplies that represented the collision of their worlds. The process of Zoe moving into Adrian's penthouse was as chaotic as predicted. Her eclectic collection of furniture and art supplies seemed at odds with his minimalist, designer space. But gradually, they created a home that reflected both of them clean lines and organizational systems alongside colorful art pieces and comfortable, lived-in spaces. Adrian converted one of the spare bedrooms into a studio for Zoe, with north-facing windows for optimal light and storage for her supplies. With the Maritime Ventures Foundation funding, the Community Center art program was rebuilt better than before, with new equipment and expanded offerings. Zoe thrived in the improved space, developing additional programs for teens and seniors. Adrian found himself increasingly involved, attending exhibitions and sometimes participating in fundraising events. At the one-year mark of their relationship, Adrian took Zoe back to the same hotel where Daniel and Emma's wedding had been held. "Feeling nostalgic?" she asked as they checked into their room. "Something like that," Adrian replied with a mysterious smile. He had arranged for dinner on a private terrace overlooking the gardens where they had first met. The space was transformed with twinkling lights and flowers that echoed the wedding decorations from that day. "This is beautiful," Zoe said, taking in the romantic setting. "You went all out." "It's not every day we celebrate meeting the love of my life," Adrian said, pulling out her chair. Throughout dinner, they reminisced about their first impressions of each other and the unexpected journey of their relationship. "I never thought I'd end up with someone like you," Zoe admitted. "I always figured I'd marry some fellow artist with paint in his beard and more passion than financial sense. And I never thought I'd fall in love with a bridesmaid who tripped down the aisle," Adrian teased. "But here we are." After dessert, Adrian suggested a walk through the gardens. In the same spot where they had helped wrap centerpieces a year earlier, he stopped and turned to her. "Zoe Jackson, meeting you changed everything for me. You showed me that efficiency and success mean nothing without joy and authenticity." He reached into his pocket and knelt down, opening a small velvet box to reveal a stunning emerald ring surrounded by diamonds. Will you marry me? Zoe's hands flew to her mouth, tears springing to her eyes. Are you sure? I'm still a disaster. Just last week I spilled coffee all over your board meeting notes. I'm counting on a lifetime of beautiful disasters with you, he said, smiling up at her. Is that a yes? Yes, she laughed through her tears. Of course it's a yes. They were married 6 months later in an intimate ceremony that blended their different worlds. The wedding took place at a beachfront property Adrian owned, decorated with Zoe's artistic touch handmade paper flowers, driftwood sculptures, and paintings created by her students. Daniel served as Adrian's best man, while Emma was Zoe's maid of honor, bringing their story full circle. During the reception, Daniel clinked his glass for a toast. When Adrian told me he was asking out the bridesmaid who nearly wiped out at my wedding, I thought he was joking, he began, earning laughs from the guests. Adrian Matthews, the man who plans business acquisitions 3 years in advance, falling for the most spontaneous woman I've ever met. But watching them together this past year and a half, I've never seen two people who complement each other more perfectly. Zoe brings out Adrian's hidden joy, and Adrian gives Zoe the foundation to make her dreams reality. Emma added her own toast. Zoe called me the night after our wedding and said, I just met the most annoyingly perfect man and I think I'm in trouble. Turns out she was right. Here's to trouble of the very best kind. As they danced their first dance as husband and wife, Adrian held Zoe close, marveling at the journey that had brought them together. Did you ever imagine when you saw me trip down the aisle that you'd be marrying me someday? She asked, her head resting against his chest. Never, he admitted. But now I can't imagine any other outcome. Even though I'll probably spill something on your suit before the night is over, especially because of that, he laughed, spinning her gently. Besides, I have news that might make you even more disaster-prone. What's that? The Maritime Ventures Foundation Board approved your proposal. Full funding for the Zoe Matthews Art Academy for the next 5 years. She stopped dancing, staring up at him in shock. Are you serious? They approved the whole amount, every penny. You can start looking for a location next week. Tears filled her eyes. Adrian, I don't even have words. You don't need words, your actions have already said everything. He wiped a tear from her cheek. This is just the beginning, Zoe. I can't wait to see what other beautiful disasters we create together. 3 years later, the Zoe Matthews Art Academy was thriving in a renovated warehouse in a formerly underserved neighborhood. Adrian had expanded Maritime Ventures into 3 new markets, but maintained a work schedule that allowed him to be home for dinner most nights and attend important events at the academy. On the morning of their 3rd anniversary, Adrian woke to find Zoe sitting up in bed, a mysterious smile on her face and a small wrapped package in her hands. Happy anniversary, she said, handing him the gift. Inside, he found a tiny pair of sailing boots and a miniature artist's smock. Zoe. He whispered, understanding dawning on his face. Due in about 7 months, she confirmed, eyes shining. Just think of the beautiful chaos a tiny half Matthews, half Jackson will create. Adrian pulled her into his arms, overwhelmed with emotion. The most beautiful disaster yet, he murmured against her hair. As they held each other, Adrian reflected on the unexpected journey that had begun with a stumbling bridesmaid at his friend's wedding. He had never imagined then that the woman in the lavender dress would become his wife, his partner, the mother of his child, and the person who would teach him that the most perfectly planned life was nothing compared to one filled with love, passion, and yes, a little beautiful chaos.